All right. Hello, my name is Osmore, and this is my submission for Omno Any Percent into SGDQ 2023. We're currently going to be analyzing a reset run that I did of 30 minutes and 58 seconds, and it should be a pretty cool run because this game has a lot of really cool tricks scattered throughout the run. It's pretty evenly spread. The tricks that you're going to be seeing, and so I am really excited to be showing this off. It's a really nice hidden gem of a game that's been shown off only like at one really small marathon before, and I'm super excited to be showing it off here because I think a game like this could really benefit from like being exposed to like a huge audience such as GDQ, especially because of how cool the tech is and how interesting it is visually for the audience to see. And so this is Omno. We're going to be following the story of this little creature named Omno, and so I'm super excited to be showing this off, and I'm hoping to put on a good show with this if it gets accepted, because this game is a wonderful game, that's for sure. And so we're going to be going straight in and starting. Timing will begin when we enter this first cutscene after this loading screen. The timing will start right there. Perfect. And the very first thing that we're going to be doing is actually exiting to main menu and then continuing, because in doing so, you're actually skipping this cutscene that's coming up right here. At the beginning of every single area, there is a cutscene that is like that, in which you can just exit the main menu and then continue again in order to skip it in its entirety. And so that's going to be something that's pretty easy and free time save, just so long as your menuing is fast. Right here, we're in Swamp. Swamp is the area that's going to be very simple because it's short, and we're just going to be introduced to basic mechanics, which is walking and jumping. But right here, we're actually doing our very first skip, and we're going to be keeping to the edge of that bridge, and suddenly we're on like invisible level geometry, and we're going across this lake. This particular lake is supposed to be the home of a turtle. And so the cutscene that we skipped right there, by keeping to the edge of that lake, it actually allowed us to skip from the turtle from being spawned in. However, the hitbox for the turtle and like the trigger zone on the turtle that'll have the turtle like carry you to the next area, it's still there. You're just going around it so that you actually don't physically see the turtle. And so it's nice because we see this cutscene like each and every time where it just looks like we're floating or flying on nothing. And it's thankfully every single area has like an intermediary cutscene like this, because each area is split up into two parts. The first part, and then an animal brings you across in order to give you to the second part. And so we are able to skip pretty much every single cutscene like that, in which an animal brings you to the second part of the level. And speaking of cutscene skipping, that is exactly what we did right there. You saw me hug to the left of that rock, to the left of the wall, and I actually skipped something called a discovery cutscene. It's a very small 4 to 5 second cutscene that just shows you a wide shot of the area that you're about to discover, and you can actually physically walk around pretty much the majority of the discovery cutscene triggers that we see in this game. Right here, we're going to be doing something called Aqui Skip, in order to jump on this little piece of level geometry right here in between the column and the rock that we're trying to jump onto. It's a small little piece of like an invisible wall you can see, and you can get just enough height to ledge grab onto the rock and then interact with this final pedestal that will let you complete Aqui Pit and make it really quick. And so that is the end of the first area, or the first chapter of the game, I should say. And that skip that we just did with Aqui Pit, that allowed us to skip a lot of different puzzles and collecting of orbs. There's a lot of orbs in this game, and I'm pretty excited to see how GDQ chat is going to respond to that. And now we're going to go straight into Agnea, and the first thing that we did right there was once again skip another cutscene by quitting out into main menu and then continuing. But the very first thing we're going to be doing here in Agnea is skipping another discovery cutscene by going a little bit out of our way to do it, as a matter of fact, by jumping onto this rock and then hitting some more level geometry between these rocks in order to jump up here, and then we're going to physically walk around the trigger by keeping to the right and then immediately going towards our first ability of the game. The ability that we're going to be getting is the dash ability, but the first thing we're going to be seeing here is actually I'm doing an animation cancel in which I am pulling out the map, interacting with the cube that gives me the dash ability, and then closing the map all in quick succession of each other, in order to skip the animation of me collecting the ability, and I can just move faster in a little bit of a frozen state. And right here we see the dash ability. It's pretty simple to use. It does have a little bit of a cooldown after each and every dash, but that's just something that you get used to when it comes to the timing. And we're trying to jump up and hit this ledge specifically because we're about to do a glitch known as a ledge warp. And so you have to dash into the wall and then dash into the ledge underneath that wall at a very specific time and from a very specific distance. So you can see that I'm doing it. You have to stick pretty close to the edge. Don't fall too far back. If you do that at the right angle and at the right timing and right distance, you're able to ledge warp up onto the next ledge above the ledge that you warped with. And so we are able to easily do that throughout the run because our FPS is currently set to 240 FPS cap. Unfortunately, that's a trick that is a little bit FPS dependent. It's not impossible on lower FPSs, but it is a lot more easy to do on higher FPSs, which is why our current FPS cap is 240 FPS. Typically speaking, you are actually pretty okay with keeping the FPS cap at 144 FPS or even 60 FPS and getting pretty successful ledge warps, but pretty much anything above 30 FPS should be suitable depending on what your machine can do. And so being able to get them more consistently on higher FPSs is pretty useful if your PC can handle that. So right here, we're actually going to be going into the next area, Malaha, and we're going to be skipping another discovery cutscene for Malaha by doing another ledge warp up here and going into an area that we actually consider out of bounds right there. And now we're going to do another dash when we gain a little bit more height onto this platform. This is the out of bounds area, but then we're going to go immediately back inbounds and we're going to collect our first orb of the run. This is actually the only area in which you actually have to collect all 3 of the orbs in order to progress. Each area, the intended solution is you're supposed to collect 3 orbs. There's several orbs scattered throughout the level, but you're only supposed to collect 3 to unlock the final puzzle and then move on with the rest of the level. And so that is something that we're going to be seeing here. And what I just got there was a glitch that if you dash at the same time that final cutscene from seeing all the orbs appear on the pedestal, if you dash at the same time that cutscene starts, you can actually dash through the cutscene, which saves significant amount of time adding up throughout the run, because you can do that in other parts in which you have to collect orbs. We're only going to see it here, I believe, in this particular video. And right there, you saw me jump onto some more invisible level geometry, just a little bit of stuff that juts out in that corner, conveniently for us to be able to jump and skip the entire final puzzle. We did collect the 3 orbs. We did not have to skip, or we did not have to do the final puzzle. We just easily able to skip that. So that is the end of Malaha. And now we just interact with this pedestal and move on to the next area, just Sagia/Lake Ober. And the reason that is combined into one instead of in half like the other areas is because we have a huge skip that allows us to skip the majority of both of those areas, and it combines itself with like the most with like the chillest section of the run in terms of what ability we get, and also in terms of aesthetic. And so during this cutscene, if I'm not like busy like trying to catch up and explain something, it's also a really good time for donations. We're going to see multiples of these cutscenes coming up, and so it ranges anywhere between 20 seconds and like a minute, and so during these cutscenes it's pretty good for donations or just plugs of any kind. And now we're going to go and quit to main menu and then continue again to skip the first cutscene of Sagia, and believe it or not, you can actually move before this like fade in finishes, and you can hear me dashing right before that starts. And we're going to be collecting another ability right here. It's one of the best abilities in the game, and pretty much every single ability that we get is incredibly conducive to the speedrun. It allows you to save so much time. And an animation cancel in order to get a few more dashes in before we can officially use this ability known as surf, or in this case it's more like snowboarding. But you can surf on any particular object, and some interesting things about surfing is that there is a maximum speed that you can. There is a speed cap that you have throughout this particular section and throughout all surfing in the game. Even if you're going downhill, you can technically build up some more speed, but you do have a cap. And however, your speed does decrease when you go up hills, and so you're going to see me whenever I go up a hill. You're going to try and jump as much as you can in order to preserve your momentum. It only works so much and only gets you so far, but you can lose your speed ever so slightly slower if you continue to jump instead of just continuing to surf. So you're just going to be cutting corners here. In this particular section, it's incredibly chill, especially if you're playing this for the first time. And it's a nice contrast between the thing that's going to come up after this surfing section, in which we're going to be performing the biggest skip in the game. And one that's incredibly interesting, to say the least. Just cutting some corners here, trying to make sure we're preserving our momentum as much as we possibly can. And in this last section of this large surfing area, we're going to be skipping another cutscene by jumping onto this rock and then immediately dashing after jumping off of it again. And the reason that I did that was because if you kept surfing through that particular area, you were actually going to hit a trigger that would cause you to move in slow motion for around 3 to 4 seconds. It's a very small and minute time save in the grand scheme of things, but it's something that's really useful to do if you know how to do it in the moment. And so right here, we're going to line ourselves up with this plant, and we're going to change to 30 FPS. We're about to do the biggest trick in the game, and it's only possible on 30 FPS. After doing so, we're going to get on top of the plant, stand in a very specific position, and then interact with it to get yeeted up into the air. Just a huge launch upwards. And you can actually also surf in order to get a bit more height and distance, but we don't do that here because it's not really necessary. But of course, if you want to go down faster, you can surf as such. And we're going to be dashing through the air because we don't quite have enough distance to get where we need to go with the launch by itself. But since we're so high up, we can just keep dashing to where we need to go. And we're going to go right there onto that final pedestal. And that skip allows us to go and skip Sagya and Lake Ober in their entirety. There's 2 areas in which we were supposed to collect like 3 orbs in each area in order to unlock a final puzzle and then do 2 large cutscenes. And so we just skip all of that. It's like the biggest skip in the game, and if you really know how to do it well, it's like nearly free. Like I rarely ever get that like over 2 tries, and most of the time you get it first try if you just line yourself up pretty well, because it's a little bit generous, but it's at the same time, as long as you just know where to line yourself up, it's pretty easy to do. And that's only possible on 30 FPS, not possible on anything higher than that. You have to keep your 30 FPS cap max, and thankfully there's an in-game FPS control, and so that's not something that we have to like worry about externally or anything like that, and that's pretty easy for us to manipulate on our own. And so that is the end of Lake Ober, a massive gold, as you can see here on my end. And now we're going to be going back to main menu and continuing in the game, and we're going to go and change our FPS back to 240 after performing that skip, because generally speaking, 240, as I mentioned before, allows for easier ledge warps and also allows you to jump up higher in particular sections, which makes just platforming and performing certain skips a lot easier in the game. We're going to be collecting this ability called teleport. We don't do an animation cancel there because it's the only particular part of the run that you don't need to put an animation cancel, because it doesn't save any time, but only for that particular ability. And now we're going to be interacting with this button in order to open up a teleporting pad. Whenever you see these teleporting pads here on the wall or either on the floor, you can just press E and you're going to immediately teleport it to the teleporting pad if you're within a specific radius of it. And those radiuses tend to be generally very large and very spacious, and so it's kind of generous, the amount of space that the game will give you. And we're going to be jumping and trying to preserve our momentum here, just barely missing that platform where to slide down, but it's perfectly fine. And we're going to be pressing a button here, and we're going to be doing an animation cancel that you saw there. I was able to interact with the object and dash at the same time, and that is an animation cancel in which you saw that I was like pushing a button, but I was still moving, and so it allowed me to interact with the jumping pad or the teleportation pad earlier and just save a little bit of time. You're going to actually see me do that animation cancel a lot more later. And so after this, we're here in Cavulta Canyon, and we're going to skip pretty much the entirety of Cavulta Canyon using more of the glitches that have already been introduced. But this particular section is actually much easier to do with the surfing ability, because you can gain just the right amount of height and distance in order to ledge grab onto this particular platform with the surf ability. And we're going to ledge warp right here, and then ledge warp once more upwards, and grab that ledge. That is probably like the perfect ledge warp that you can possibly get in that section. Sometimes when you ledge grab on, the game like drops you down, and it doesn't really feel like anything you can particularly control. But that is the end of Cavulta Canyon, and we're gonna go straight into Unkh-Tuur. And this is another cutscene which an animal, I believe a velociraptor, is meant to like carry you through this desert section into Unkh-Tuur. But of course, since we physically went around the cutscene that prevented the velociraptor from spawning, it doesn't really matter all that much. And so we can just go through this cutscene and pretend like we're floating on nothing. It's absolutely, I find it to be kind of hilarious. But again, another good moment for donations to be read, and another good moment for any plugs to be made, as I also hydrate. All right, so now we're at the end of the cutscene that brings us into Unkh-Tuur, and we are no longer flying on this friend here, on this invisible friend, and now we're going to be dashing and surfing downwards in order to activate 3 rings that will activate a teleportation pad to bring us into the main section of Unkh-Tuur right here. After activating this last one, you have a teleportation pad right here, and now we're going to be performing another cutscene skip, another discovery cutscene skip, because we're just barely in range of this teleportation pad in order to interact with it before we enter the cutscene trigger, and that'll just skip the cutscene entirely. And now we're in this desert area in which we are introduced to these giraffe animals, giraffe-like animals, I should say. And these giraffe-like animals are just there for to look pretty and to give us more scenery, as is most of the animals in this game. You do have to use them casually, but like in the speedrun, we don't need to use them at all. We're going to activate this switch that'll turn on a teleportation pad the other side of the desert, and as there's a timer counting down from when we need to use that, we're going to be collecting this orb right in the center of those ribs, collecting that orb after going through the teleportation pad that we activated, and then we're going to be collecting one last orb really quickly by ledge warping onto this platform, and immediately getting the ledge grab too. And so this is the second section in which we're going to be actually collecting all 3 of the orbs. There's one more in the next area that we're going to be doing, but it's not. But thankfully, the majority of the areas we do get to skip those in their entirety. This particular section, there is a timer. You can fill up a meter at the very center of this area, and there's a timer that is causing the meter to go down every time that you're not interacting with one of these buttons. And so we hit these buttons 5 times in order to fill the meter up before it depletes, and if you did it right, it should activate that teleportation pad. And since we're already on the section closest to the teleportation pad, it's pretty convenient for us. And we're going to activate this teleportation pad over here to the far left. This is the only trick in the run that I actually looked back and I had like a bit of a struggle with. And so we're going to be dashing into this sensor right here, into this teleportation pad. We're going to try it again. We get this 3rd try, and we are dashing and then teleporting to the pad at a very specific angle in order to get stuck in the pad and then jump on top of it again. We're going to be ledge grabbing onto this block right here, and what we want to do, we're not going to get it right here because we mess up a little bit of our platforming. What we want to do is actually ledge grab and get over this particular puzzle, so we don't have to solve it in its entirety. So we don't have to open this door. And this time we're going to get it in its entirety, and we're going to be just jumping towards this large platform again, and then we're able to dash and ledge grab onto that platform above. Activate this checkpoint because we want to actually use it for later, and then this second part of the puzzle is pretty nice. Sometimes those sensors are a little bit finicky and they're not quite precise in their lock-ons as you'd like them to be. There's no fast cycles for these platforms when we activate the sensors, but what we're actually doing is moving these platforms, these towers, and then death warping back to the checkpoint that we got at the beginning of the section, which is why we got it. And then we are going to activate the sensor on the right side. And again, there's no fast cycle for this for these platforms. You just kind of have to wait for them to come back. And the reason that we want to move those 2 large towers in the center is actually to make a clear line of sight for the laser on the second for this second sensor in the center, and that'll activate the final teleportation pad at the end of this puzzle in order for us to immediately dash there and get to the end of the level. That is the closest thing in this game that we're going to be getting to an intended solution for any particular thing. And that is something that I really like about this game. There's just a lot of unintended solutions and stuff, a lot of glitches and a lot of skips that we're going to be using. Very fun stuff, very interesting stuff for the audience to see, and the fact you see it throughout the entirety of the run is pretty interesting. And so I am going to be opening up this section again as another opportunity for any donations to be read, any blurbs to be read, anything of the sort. And that is the end of Unkh-Tuur. Alright, now we're going to go straight into Pulyang height. And this is the final time that we're going to be exiting to main menu and then continuing in order to skip a particular cutscene. And now we're going to be dashing before the fade end stops, and in this section we actually are going to unlock the final ability of the game, and this is an ability that allows us to do a lot. And like, if you could have like somehow get a new game plus kind of thing going, which you unlock all your abilities at the very beginning of the game, you would skip so much with this ability, just because it allows you to get so much distance. And that is the float ability that we're going to get after doing another animation cancel. And as the float ability implies, we're just going to be floating. You do tend to lose height as the more you float, but because you get so much distance with the floating ability, you can actually skip really large portions of the game that we're going to be seeing consistently throughout this final area of Pulyang height. This Pulyang height, this particular split, is the longest of all the splits in the game. And because technically this final area is divided into 3 and not 2, but we have 2 splits for it. And we're going to jump here, and after surfing off that platform, we're going to activate the float ability that we just got. And you see all of this wind? Well, the hitbox for this wind actually dips downward, and so if you were to float and then just float towards the wind's hitbox, you would just barely have enough space in order to get caught by the wind, and then floating upwards as you hold down the float ability. You want to tap forward in order to move forward closer to this platform, but you don't want to hold forward, because then you're not going to gain any height. You're just going to be floating in the same height plane but moving forward. And so we're going to be doing here another animation cancel in order to activate that teleportation pad a bit faster and teleport towards it. And now we're going to be doing another cutscene, discovery cutscene skip, by dashing on top of that sensor, or that teleportation pad, using it as a platform. This is the only animal in the game that we actually, or the only creature in the game that we're actually going to be using as part of a strat. We're going to be jumping on that flying little guy's head, and then we're going to be using him as a platform in order to jump onto that small area. That doesn't save as much time as you think, because there is a pretty good backup for it, but it's just really nice to see. This particular section, I usually don't get first try, only because it's a lot of really quick inputs in quick succession. You want to surf and then float and then dash. The floating ability you just want to do for the smallest amount of time in order to get enough distance to dash and then ledge grab onto the platform where the first orb is going to be. This is the final area that we're going to be collecting all of the orbs in the quote intended way, but that's not really the intended way per se, because of course the abilities that you have in order to get all of these orbs are not being used in the intended way whatsoever. And now this is the final orb. We're going to just activate these jumping pads through this switch, and then going around the corner and collecting this final orb. To my knowledge, if I recall correctly, we don't actually get this final cutscene glitch that we got at the beginning of the game, where you can dash at the same time this cutscene starts. But that's perfectly fine. Sometimes the game does that, in which it changes your camera angle after that particular cutscene. It's a little annoying, but you get used to it. And now we're going to be doing a lot of animation cancels, like I mentioned earlier, in which we dash and interact with the object at the same time. What I'm actually going to be doing right here after performing all of that is during this cutscene, which it shows you that you've solved the puzzle and you can move on to the next phase of the puzzle, you can actually move whatever column it is you're at right now. So right now, as this cutscene is playing out, I'm actually moving the third column to the right 3 times in order to set it up for the next combination I need to put in. And After that, we've successfully completed all 3 phases of the code. Of course, you don't have to unlock any particular way of finding the code out. As long as you know what the code is, you can easily do it in that particular order. You do have to put it in that order, by the way. And now we're going to be doing another skip with the float ability that's really useful. We get a second try here because we messed up by hitting a particular part of the rock that you don't want to be hitting, that's like facing towards you, and it caused you to lose your float ability here. And we're going to be dashing over here to being boosted over here to the left with the float ability, and instead of going towards the mainland, we're actually going to be dashing all the way down here. You think we're going to end up voiding out, but no, we just barely have enough distance between us and another teleporting pad in order to teleport through these 3 pads and skip a lot of content, actually. And we're going to be doing the same thing, purposefully losing a little bit of height and then immediately turning a sharp left, getting a little bit more height from these butterflies right here. And we're going to be going out of our way and grabbing a particular checkpoint for safety purposes. I do these in my runs for safety purposes, and I will always do in a marathon run for safety purposes, because we're actually going to be coming up into a skip that saves a lot of time, but also loses a little bit of time if you mess it up and you have to just go back to your checkpoint, because you will void out if you mess it up. And so right here, we're going to be walking, and we're going to be surfing towards the wall at a very specific angle. We're going to get it right here in order to build up speed and just barely have enough to get on top of this platform right here. And so while we don't void out or fall down or have to redo this entire section, it does take me a little bit of time here because you need to be dashing and surfing at a very specific angle into the wall in order to build up speed. Typically speaking, it works a little bit better if you do it from that corner, but that's not always the case. And right there you saw I got enough height and I got enough momentum in order to get enough distance and land onto this platform right here. And I'm going to activate this cutscene immediately. This is the only cutscene that me personally, I don't go for the cutscene skip because it's a very inconsistent the setup for me. And if you mess it up, you have to start that entire section over again, including the 2 skips that you just saw. And so if you're really on good pace, or if you're doing it in a marathon setting, me personally, I don't think that's worth it. Plus, we get to see one of our little animal friends, this dragon guy. And so that is the end of Pulyang Heights. And now we're going to go into the final split of the game, the final section of the game. And it's going to be split into 2 small parts as well. So this cutscene is pretty long. And so it's a pretty good donation section. Or to fill out any blurbs that need to be said. And so I am just going to be leaving that particular section because this is probably like the last section that we're going to be having for donations, because the final cutscene I'm probably going to be doing some more shoutouts and such. But yeah, this run has been pretty good so far, pretty decent. And I would be really excited to be showing this off at a marathon setting, because stuff like this would be absolutely great. And so I think this game is such a hidden gem and has such a cool speed run to it, with all the speed tech and all the glitches and all the skips you can do. Very visually interesting for an audience, very mechanically interesting for the runner, and overall just a 10 out of 10 package, I would say. And now we're going to be introduced to some of these long-legged creatures that you can collect some of their bios for 100%. But of course, any percent, we just go straight to the end, try to beat the game as fast as possible. And thankfully, any percent is just the flashiest of the categories, and it's done at a pretty healthy length, so pretty good for marathon settings as well. And now we're going to be dashing forward, and this is the final area. We're going to do one more discovery cutscene skip right here by jumping onto these rocks on the right side, and then surfing onto the rocks on the left side, and sticking towards the wall, sticking as far left to the wall as possible, and we jump over and around a particular cutscene trigger, and that we thankfully did do successfully. Falling down here, but that's perfectly fine because we are easily able to recover. And we're going to be surfing through this last area as we see these wonderful, beautiful creatures, the Patricores, as you can see, these floating guys. And we're going to be performing probably another really huge skip in this game. I would say probably one of the biggest now, but it's like another big one, but it's not like the biggest one for sure. We're going to get caught in this wind similar to how we did earlier, but we actually don't want to go all the way towards this particular beam or particular ring. These rings are usually activated after solving the puzzles the intended way, and it'll boost you towards the final island that you're supposed to see over here. But instead of doing that, we're just going to be coming towards this ring before it's activated, and we're going to be getting a lot of height and then floating down, and then we're going to be surfing onto some invisible level geometry, and then just barely getting enough height and momentum in order to float all the way down to where that island is. But you can see that we're not going to land on top of it, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be just barely being able to float past or float towards the trigger radius of a particular checkpoint, so that when we void out, we actually end up on that checkpoint in that island instead of, you know, of course, just going back and having to redo that entire section all over again. As soon as you hug this wall, you should know that you've gotten it, and you can easily just start to void out again, and find out if you got it pretty quickly after that. So we're going to get this ball of light, but then we're going to immediately get rid of it because that prevents us from doing particular tricks, such as this guy right here. We're going to be dashing, floating, and surfing, floating, and then dashing in order to get the optimal amount of distance in order to ledge grab onto these particular platforms. Do that twice. And then we're going to be doing something similar that we did at the beginning of this island in order to activate another checkpoint by dashing forward. You can hear it being thrown off right here. And unfortunately, it's smacking our face, but it's perfectly fine. We lost like 3 seconds. And since we activated that top checkpoint, we can skip all the puzzle solving that it takes, all the fun platforming, and just immediately go up to the top. But that is pretty much the run. That's Omno any %. And we're going to be doing this final cutscene and flying above the area that we just saw, most of which we have skipped, of course. And then there's one final area in this section. I could probably use this section as a final shout out time, or if I feel like doing my shouts at the end, we can squeeze in like 1 or 2 more donations at the very end here. And so at the very end of this section, time is going to be coming up at around 30 seconds or so. And so at the end of this cutscene, we're just going to be doing some basic movement and dashing and surfing off of particular objects to gain some more speed, and immediately exiting this next section. Perfect. And now we're going to be turning on this switch, and as soon as this cutscene starts and the screen fades to white, we are able to call time at the end of this section. So 3, 2, 1, time. All right, that is Omno any %. A pretty good run, I would say. And we're going to be activating this cutscene right here, in which our little guy, who has been a companion to us the entire time, we have to go back home, but he doesn't want us to go back home. And spoiler alert, we choose to stay with him because the real journey was the friends we made along the way, of course. But yeah, that is Omno any %. You don't hear any sound here because I probably tabbed out when I was originally making this recording. But it's a wonderful game. It is a very cute and wholesome game in its story and the different characters that you see. But at the same time, it's very glitch heavy, it's very skip heavy, it's very tech heavy. A lot of stuff that you're going to be seeing me do throughout the run, and that's going to be pretty visually impressive to the audience. And I would be absolutely honored to see this get shown off at a mainline GDQ, because it's a hidden gem and something that I would absolutely love to get more exposure towards. But yeah, I'm going to pause there, and I've been Osmore, and this has been Omno any %, and I really hope that you can give it a good shot. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day, night, evening, whenever you're watching this. So hope to see you around.